American pastor Andrew Brunson is finally free. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Ben Kennedy. After 2 years of prison and detention, Pastor Brunson is heading home. He was released today after a hearing in Turkey. Now the court there upheld its terrorism conviction of the Christian pastor, but still allowed him to leave. Pastor Andrew Brunson seen leaving the courthouse in Turkey after being let go.
He is being sent home to the United States. This has just happened. The court just released Pastor Brunson. He's being turned over to U.S. custody.
His arrest brought two NATO allies, the U.S. and Turkey, face to face in a major geopolitical confrontation over the fate and future of a Christian minister. President Trump tweeted, "My thoughts and prayers are with Pastor Brunson, and we hope to have him safely back home soon." Lawmakers on the Hill are elated by the news, especially North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis.
He has been on the Senate floor every week for months advocating for Pastor Brunson's release. He went over to Turkey. He visited him in prison, and Pastor Brunson told Senator Tillis, "Please make sure they don't forget about me in America." And he has made sure that Pastor Brunson has not been forgotten.
The evangelical pastor was arrested and detained in Turkey since 2016. Brunson faced 35 years in prison, tried on espionage and terror-related charges, which he denied.
Hundreds of thousands of people have been praying for Pastor Brunson, not just in the United States, but around the world.
Free Pastor Andrew!
Those prayers were answered today. In an effort to get him released, the White House imposed economic sanctions against Turkey.
Our administration has made very clear that we will continue to stand strong until Pastor Andrew Brunson is free.
In his final defense, Brunson said, "I am an innocent man. I love Jesus. I love Turkey." He was sentenced to time served and is now headed home to the U.S. Well, Jordan Sekulow of the American Center for Law and Justice, which played a major role representing Pastor Brunson, joins us now. Jordan, first of all, how is he? We understand Pastor Brunson is already on his way home as we speak.
That's right. I mean, we're just moments away from that plane taking off from Turkey to likely to be Germany, to a U.S. military base there, and then on the way to the United States. This is a time, again, you asked how is Pastor Brunson, he'll be traveling to with his wife. This has been a very difficult process. It eased somewhat when he was put under house arrest back in July, but he had already been in prison then since October of 2016. So the health concerns, there's always, everybody should be in prayer because these situations, it's a day to celebrate the release. It's for the family and for Pastor Brunson, and to thank the Trump administration and President Trump himself for the direct role he played, but to not stop praying for this family and not forget what they have gone through, even though this is a joyous day, the healing that has to go through, and also just the emotions that and I can say that after dealing with a number of these cases similar to this, that the healing the need for healing doesn't stop the day you're released.
Well, Jordan, walk us through what happened in court today.
This was interesting. So we knew this was an important trial date, and there were a lot of news reports going on the last 24 hours about this likely being a court date that will lead to Pastor Brunson's release. Now, we represent Pastor Brunson and the family at the American Center for Law and Justice, so we were very quiet because if we speak publicly, it's official on behalf of the client, and so and we also know diplomatically these things can get very close to being settled, and then ultimately it can fall apart. Now, I will tell you without going into details, it's happened throughout this process with Pastor Brunson, unfortunately, a couple of times, not because of anything the administration, our administration did, or that Pastor Brunson did, but just because of the diplomatic issue. So at today's trial, basically, the witnesses who were secret, by the way, throughout this process, so it's not like a U.S. trial at all, basically recanted. As all the reports have indicated, and Pastor Brunson got sentenced to time served. That's kind of a face-saving measure for Turkey, and ultimately, the pastor was ordered to be released from house arrest. So he had his ankle bracelet taken off and allowed to be given back his passport and to travel, and so ultimately to leave Turkey and return to the United States.
Now, Jordan, moving forward, what kind of impact will this have on U.S.-Turkey relations?
So I think this improves the relationship. There's the issue with the journalist that Turkey is very concerned about, the Saudi journalist, and wanting the U.S. assistance there. There were also economic sanctions put in place on 2 Turkish officials because of the imprisonment of Pastor Brunson, the Minister of Justice there and the Minister of the Interior. So there were economic issues. That being said, I would say that the relationship with Turkey and the U.S. as NATO allies was at a low point. Today it improves, but there are still people imprisoned because of their affiliation with the United States of America. They're Turkish citizens who worked for the U.S. Embassy in Ankara, and they are still in prison. So I know that they will not be forgotten by the U.S. government. So this improves the relationship. There are still issues to work out between the United States and Turkey, and I think it sets a better stage to work all those other issues out, because Pastor Brunson and the Trump administration was very strong on this, was a bar to moving forward on other issues that Turkey was concerned with, especially their economy, which has significantly improved. Even on the news yesterday that it was likely he would be released, the Turkish lira was rebounding to numbers it hadn't seen in a very long time.
What words do you have for friends of ACLJ and CBN who have prayed and petitioned for Pastor Brunson's release?
You know, these cases aren't quick, unfortunately. We try to handle them as quickly as possible. We were thankful, I think, because of all those prayers. People stuck with this for 2 years in a time when it is a story that sometimes has people scratching their heads because it is a NATO ally. It's not. We're not talking about dealing with a country like Iran or North Korea. We have we're supposed to have great relationships with our NATO allies. So the one with Turkey has deteriorated. Hopefully, it will now improve. It's important relationship. But I want to just thank everybody. They continue to pray. They continue to talk about this story. They continue to provide updates when they were necessary about Pastor Brunson. And ultimately, the President of the United States, because of everyone's concern and his concern as well, made this a top priority for his administration. So I think we all owe a lot of gratitude to President Trump, Vice President Pence, Secretary of State Pompeo, and their teams, as well as a number of members of Congress like Senator Lindsey Graham, a Republican, but also Senator Jeanne Shaheen, a Democrat. There was actually bipartisan, which is not much bipartisan work in Washington these days. There was bipartisan work on Pastor Brunson, but we wouldn't have gotten to that point without all the people who watch CBN, who watch these broadcasts, who pray for Pastor Brunson, and who care about these issues and support the work that we do at the ACLJ.
Jordan Sekulow, we appreciate your time and work at the ACLJ. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Aaron Mercer is the Vice President of Government Relations for the National Religious Broadcasters. Aaron, thanks you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, today we're talking the big story. Pastor Andrew Brunson is released. Why was this such a big deal for the Trump administration?
Well, first of all, praise God he's released. I mean, this is a day that we should be celebrating and looking forward to the pastor's soon return to the United States. This is a big deal. This American pastor, an American from North Carolina, he has been held for 2 years. It was October of 2016 when he was originally detained by the Turkish authorities. And this administration has been working for a long time to try to get this pastor freed. And quite frankly, a lot of credit should go to the president himself, to the Vice President, the Secretary of State, the Ambassador for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, as well as a number of members of Congress, have been very, very much focused on this subject, raising it in high-level meetings, and even going so far as to enforce sanctions against the Turkish government until they've released Pastor Brunson. He didn't do anything wrong. He needed to be released.
Now, Aaron, the midterms are just around the corner. Do you consider this to be a major victory, a major win for the Trump administration?
I think this is a win for the Trump administration. I think it's a win for our country. Our nation united to try to get this man home. There were members of Congress from both parties that were working on this, but you know, the Trump administration, the president and the vice president and the Secretary of State raised this personally often. And they got the Turkish government to pay attention. And, you know, the Turks have a different view on this, But the president, or I'm sorry, the pastor, he was jailed because of his faith. And this administration said, you know, that's not going to happen. They wouldn't take no for an answer, and they made sure that he is now free.
Aaron, you're talking about faith. Religious persecution is happening all around the world. One place in particular, North Korea, there literally is no religious rights. Pastor Andrew Brunson has been released. Fantastic news, but there are several other evangelical leaders that are being detained as we speak. What kind of signal, what sign does this send to them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. There are others who need to be freed. And I think one lesson we can take away from this is, first of all, this administration is serious about taking care of Americans who are unjustly incarcerated overseas. But I also think this administration has showed that it's serious about international religious freedom generally. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo over the summer had the first of its kind International Religious Freedom Summit at the State Department, brought countries in from all over the world and made sure that those countries and others know that this is a priority for us. You mentioned North Korea. The president raised issues of Christian persecution in his summit back in June.
And there's a second summit coming
up.
And
they are not going to let that one go. And quite frankly, there were other prisoners who have been released over the course of this administration already, too. So, you know, and Ambassador Brownback, I know he's constantly traveling around the world and raising the flag on this issue. Other countries need to know that this is they need to pay attention to international religious freedom. And there's a great need. I think you hit on that just now. There's a great need. There are millions of Christians around the world that are facing severe hardship and persecution of one kind or another. A number of them are in prison. Certainly North Korea is a place where a lot are in prison, but there's a lot around the world. And there's growing persecution in China, in India, and other countries that we need to be paying attention to, and making sure that those nations know we're going to take it seriously for Christians and for other religious minorities.
Well said. Andrew Mercer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
We'll have you back soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, Hurricane Michael is gone, leaving utter devastation in the wake in the Florida Panhandle, facing years of recovery. Even as the storm left Florida, it continued to bring heartache. So far, it has killed 11 people. Gary Lane has more.
After monster Hurricane Michael passed, video drones took to the skies of Panama City, revealing the extent of the damage. This is what's left of Mexico Beach, once a pristine and popular destination, now wiped out as if a bomb went off. But this devastation was not man-made. It was a powerful explosion of nature, one of the most powerful hurricanes on record. Michael came ashore 20 miles southeast of Panama City with sustained winds of 155 miles per hour and a storm surge catastrophic sea waves of 13 feet. By Friday morning, entire neighborhoods and beaches had disappeared.
So many lives have been changed forever. So many families have lost everything. Homes are gone, businesses are gone.
Department of Defense helicopter teams stepped in to conduct daring nighttime rescues of some people needing emergency evacuation. And at daylight, search and rescue teams went door to door, looking for people who may still be trapped inside their homes.
Mexico Beach took the brunt. That's probably ground zero.
The hurricane ripped the roofs off hotels and homes, shredding vinyl siding and scattering wood like toothpicks.
We were hiding in the closet, and all I could hear was a lot of wind, and I thought the roof was going to come off.
This woman and her husband were nearly swept away by winds and storm surge.
We'd let the current take us to the next stop, and then we'd grab onto a tree.
Michael moved quickly through Georgia, the Carolinas, Virginia, and then out to sea. Floodwaters surged through the Carolinas, already drenched by Hurricane Florence. Downed trees and gale-force winds knocked power out to 900,000 homes and businesses. This Virginia woman attempted to drive through rising floodwaters.
I was sinking, it was sinking fast. When I turned, I immediately started sinking, and I knew that I had hit the ditch. And I put it in reverse, and of course, it didn't go anywhere. I just thank God that my kids or my grandkids were not in the car.
Michael brought hardship in the southeast, but devastation in the Florida Panhandle. CBN's Caitlin Burke has this up-close look from Mexico Beach near Panama City. Gary Lane, CBN News.
And one of the hardest hit cities is Mexico Beach, Florida. You just heard Gary talk about it. As their crews are working to restore communication to the area, but those who are evacuated are being told it is not safe to go home. Caitlin Burke brings us the first-hand look of the devastation there.
There's really no other way to describe what we've found here in Mexico Beach other than complete and utter devastation. When you hear about this being a 100-year storm, you can really see it here. And it's not a matter of weeks or months before things get back to normal. It's got to be a matter of years.
So far, everybody's house I went to, there's no house to check.
In this town of about 1,200, 100% of the structures were affected.
It was scary. We found a house on the far side, blocked it up with a dresser, and my boss flew out the window. I grabbed him, brought him back in.
The infrastructure has been destroyed. Not only are power lines down, but the storm surge unearthed and tossed around the gas and water lines and completely wiped out parts of the road. First responders from Louisiana say the wreckage left behind is eerily similar to that left by Hurricane Katrina. Teams from across the country are here searching for survivors still trapped in their homes or beneath the rubble.
The one thing that you know with these first responders coming in is that they're coming into the unknown. We don't know the area. We're not sure what kind of devastation. We don't know what kind of hazards they have here. But the only thing that we know is that we're here to do a job, and that is to find people that need to be rescued and get them back to their loved ones.
The team we've embedded with is the City of Miami Task Force 2. Firefighters year-round, but during hurricane season, they deploy to each disaster. Following Hurricane Florence, most of the team was in South Carolina for 2 weeks, and then almost immediately, they deployed here. They'll be here until the search and rescue is done.
The rubble that you can see behind me used to be an apartment building. That was over here. You can see the foundation. The storm surge completely washed it away, obliterated it. What we're hearing as the moral of this storm from rescue crews and survivors: when a hurricane is coming, no matter the category, evacuate every time.
You know, you know the risks, you take the risks, and so I took and I lost.
It was truly horrible. Nobody should ever try to ride out a 4 or 5. We regretted it the whole time. We thank God we're okay.
Just walking around looking to get out of here.
Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Mexico Beach, Florida.
And coming up, a look at the state of the U.S. economy after a wild week on Wall Street. After 2 days of big tumbles, the stock market saw little good news today. The Dow Jones Industrial Average ended the day nearly 300 points. That comes after 2 days of massive sell-offs. On Wednesday, the Dow ended down more than 800 points. Yesterday, it was down another 545 points. And Dan Celia is president and CEO of Financial Issues Stewardship Ministries. He joins us now for more. Hey, Dan.
Ben, how are you?
Not too bad. Well, Dan, it was a turbulent week on Wall Street. Everyone was kind of watching the numbers. What was the reason behind that?
Well, I don't think anybody really knows the reason. Obviously, there are some specific things that we can point to. You know, very volatile. You lose 1,300 points in a couple of days, you start to get concerned. And, you know, I think a lot of the concern is on a couple fronts. One is there seems to have been a mounting, a buildup of all at once everybody getting concerned about China-U.S. Tariff relations. And that kind of came to a little bit of a head as we watched over the few prior days of the yuan, the currency in China, devaluing. Then there was some talk, are they intentionally devaluation, or is this devaluation intentional? Of course, the U.S. worries about, to a certain extent, the Chinese economy and what is happening. And they're worried about trade and tariffs and what that will mean, frankly, for the first quarter next year. It's not going to mean a whole lot to anything this year, although some are saying it is. It really isn't. It's going to be the first quarter of next year, and how that's going to impact next year's earnings coming right out of the gate in the first quarter. And it will impact earnings to a certain extent, but it's not going to be as dramatic, in my opinion, as everybody thinks. When we look at what we, send to China, this is going to have a much more dramatic be such a much more dramatic problem for China than it's going to be for the U.S. economy. But when we add to it some of the concerns about interest rates and the Federal Reserve, I don't want to blame the Fed. I don't believe it's the Fed's fault. I think what is happening really, Ben, when we look at this, is we have a market, not an economy now, I'm talking about the market, that is adjusting. It's shifting from standing on the foundation of central banks, and I say banks because I include some of the central banks around the world and what they've done in our market, but it has been standing firmly on central banks and what they're doing, and that's been going on for 10 years. Now we're shifting to the foundations of the economy, and that's a big shift.
Now, Dan, you're talking about trade, China, the interest markets, a lot to cover here, but even with the slip in the market, is the economy strong overall?
Yes, the economy hasn't wavered a bit. It is a very, very strong economy. The fundamentals, the underlying foundation of this economy are extremely strong, and around every corner, they get a little bit stronger. There hasn't been any wavering on that at all.
Now, Dan, the Federal Reserve recently announced it would raise interest rates again. What kind of impact could this have on the everyday American?
Well, it has an impact already on the everyday American, because when young people and people moving to maybe moving up in a home or downsizing, you know, we're looking at a 5.05% 30-year mortgage rate. And from a historical standpoint, Ben, that's not a big deal. It really isn't. But we have, for so many years, been in this low interest rate environment that people are saying, oh, my word, 5%. And that is impacting the housing market, the mortgage market, and what construction is doing. If I were worried about one thing in the market, it would probably be construction, real estate, and even commercial construction at this point.
Well, Dan, I just bought a house, so I appreciate your insight and advice. Dan Celia, thanks for your time.
You're welcome, Ben. Thank you.
After the break, how one church is still working to serve its neighbors after Hurricane Michael. Now, some churches in the Florida Panhandle are already stepping up to minister to their hurting communities. Heather Sells talked with one pastor whose church suffered terrible damage, but isn't letting that stop their congregation from serving their neighbors.
Hurricane Michael so thoroughly decimated communities like Panama City Beach that just getting in Thursday was a challenge. The problem downed power lines and trees kept emergency vehicles from entering many neighborhoods. Pastor Cole Bailey spoke to CBN News by phone and said he was walking almost a mile to see his house.
I think everyone's still in shock, to be honest. Most people have never lived through anything like this, and with this amount of damage, you know, I think really people, we're used to having air conditioning power and push a button and do whatever you want to do.
His church took a direct hit. The roof caved in, walls collapsed, and the sanctuary flooded. But his biggest concern Thursday was his people.
What all of our staff and myself and what we're all doing right now is we've got teams going out. We're checking on everybody's home. We're checking on them, because you can rebuild buildings, but we're in this thing to make sure that everybody is taken care of and loved.
90 minutes away in Pensacola, Pastor Buford Lipscomb spent the day connecting with other pastors across the Panhandle, assessing needs and sending people in. What helped their familiarity with the hard-hit areas and hurricane relief experience.
We believe it's us local people and the body of Christ that can get there before the government does and can make a difference. We have a lot of men that are going just to clear roads and clear trees off of houses. People are still trapped in their homes.
Pensacola has transformed into a staging area for many national ministries as they get ready to move in and provide for immediate needs. Despite the historic devastation, Pastor Bailey says he's ready to do whatever it takes to help his community recover.
I know that our community will rally. I know our church will rally, and I know it's going to be, we're going to have an awesome comeback.
Heather Sells, CBN News.
Thank you, Heather. That's going to do it for Faith Nation. Have a great weekend.